On May 23, 1964, Jim Templeton spent the afternoon at Burgh Marsh with his wife Annie, their 9-year-old daughter Frances, and their 5-year-old daughter Elizabeth.
In 1964, a case like this was gold dust. Lots of people had a story, but very few people actually had their story backed up with a picture. This really does look like something either from a sci-fi movie or real cutting-edge technology.
The plan was simple. Take a walk, enjoy the scenery, and snap a few photos. Burgh Marsh is a wide stretch of grassland and coastal dunes in Cumberland, England. On a clear day, the shores of Scotland can be seen from there.
So we went out on the normal outing and picked our spot, sat down, and I said, "Now, I'll take some photographs of you with the new dress on." Never expecting this to happen.
That Saturday, the Templeton family walked up a grassy rise about 8 miles west of their home in Carlisle under bright, sunny weather. Jim Templeton worked as a fireman in Carlisle.
So as Jim Templeton headed to the marsh, the only thing out of the ordinary he noticed was that the animals, the sheep and the cows that were there, were huddled together and acting frightened. But of what?
But he was also known locally as a historian and a hobby photographer. His photos had appeared in local newspapers many times, which gave him a good working relationship with reporters in the area. That afternoon, he wanted to photograph Elizabeth wearing a new dress, using his Kodak 35mm camera. When the film was developed days later, the family would come across something unexpected, something that would alter their lives and spark long-lasting interest within the UFO community, while confusing the public for decades.
Skeptics have said that the creature wasn't really a creature, it was a beekeeper in a beekeeping outfit, right? With a mask and protective garments and stuff. But if it's a beekeeper, and Templeton, as he said, reeled off those 3 photos in succession, how could a beekeeper appear in the middle photo, but not in the first 2? It makes no sense.
Burgh Marsh overlooks the Solway Firth in Cumberland, England. In 1974, Cumberland and Westmoreland were merged to form the administrative county of Cumbria. Because of this, the area is sometimes referred to by different names depending on the time period being discussed. Carlisle, where the Templeton family lived, sits at the far northwest corner of England, right along the border with Scotland. The marsh itself is a striking natural area. Bird watchers and hikers visit regularly because of its scenery and history. To the south, there is a distant view of the northern fells. The location also holds historical importance. King Edward I died of dysentery there on July 7, 1307, while camped at the marsh during a military campaign against Scotland. The marsh often floods during high tides, and some nearby roads can become unusable at certain times. The term Firth refers to coastal waters in the United Kingdom, mainly in Scotland. The word is related to fjord, which describes long, narrow sea inlets bordered by steep land. Firths are most commonly found along Scotland's east coast and in the southwest of the region. The Solway Firth forms part of the boundary between England and Scotland. Its coastline includes low hills and small mountains. The area remains mostly rural, with fishing and hill farming as key sources of income, though tourism has grown over the years. Several nature reserves are also located along the Solway Firth, with active conservation efforts aimed at protecting local wildlife and the surrounding landscape. Templeton later said the afternoon felt completely ordinary. He did notice that the cows and sheep that usually wandered the field were gathered together on the far side of the marsh. He also noticed 2 older women sitting in a parked car about 300 to 400 yards away, knitting. None of it struck him as strange. To him, it was just another calm day. Seeing nothing out of place, Jim had Elizabeth stand on a grassy slope while holding a small bunch of freshly picked flowers. The weather remained warm and clear, and nothing seemed unusual. He took 3 photos in a row using his Kodak SLR 35mm camera. After that, the family continued their walk, unaware that anything unusual had been captured. The first 2 images showed Elizabeth by herself. The third was a more casual shot that included both Elizabeth and Annie. A Kodak SLR, or single-lens reflex camera, uses an internal mirror that allows the photographer to look directly through the lens and see nearly exactly what will appear in the final image. With this type of camera, Jim had to manually turn a winding knob after each photo to move the film forward and clear the viewfinder. That meant pulling the camera away from his face after each shot to check the scene and decide whether the photo looked right. This was long before instant photo previews were possible. A few days later, Templeton picked up the developed photos from the local chemist. While handing them over, the chemist commented that he was disappointed one image had been ruined by a man walking through the frame. Confused, Templeton looked closely at the photograph. Many images have claimed to show alien figures over the years, but very few have drawn as much attention as the photo Templeton took that day, without realizing it. In the background of the image was what appeared to be a tall, human-shaped figure wearing something similar to a spacesuit. The figure appeared at an odd angle behind Elizabeth's head. It seemed either unusually tall and able to lean sharply without falling, or suspended slightly above the ground. Many people believe the faceplate of the figure can be seen just above the young girl's head. However, another explanation suggests something very different. According to this view, what looks like a face is actually the shadow cast by the base of the skull. The elbow of the figure appears to be bent backward, and the shapes that seem like a helmet may actually be the shoulder blades. From this angle, it also looks as though the figure is facing to the right. Templeton was stunned by what appeared in the photo. Neither he nor his wife had noticed anyone unusual while they were walking on the marsh that day. What confused him even more was that the figure only appeared in the middle of the 3 photos he took. It was completely absent from the first and the last image. Wanting answers, Templeton reported the photo to the police and sent it to Kodak for review. At Kodak, trained technicians examined the image closely, checking for damaged film, manipulation, or any kind of trickery. After a thorough inspection, nothing unusual was found. Kodak executives became so interested in the mystery that they offered a reward of free film for an entire year to anyone who could explain how the strange figure ended up in the picture. The company later confirmed that the photograph was authentic and rejected the police theory that it was a double exposure, where one image is accidentally layered over another during processing. Chief Superintendent Old Corn dismissed the photo as nothing more than a strange accident, calling it simply a freak image. Even so, it didn't take long for the photograph to spread. Newspapers across the world published it, and the image quickly became international news. On December 7, 2002, Templeton spoke to the Daily Mail in London and gave a short account of what happened. What follows is his statement describing the incident. He explained that he was an amateur photographer enjoying a family day trip on Burgh Marsh on May 23, 1964. Using an SLR camera loaded with the newly released Kodacolor film, he took 3 photos of his daughter Elizabeth, all in nearly the same pose. When the film was developed by Kodak, he was shocked to see that the middle photo showed what looked like a spaceman standing in the background. Templeton said he took the image to the police in Carlisle. After careful inspection, they concluded there was nothing suspicious about the photograph. Soon after, the local paper, the Cumberland News, ran the story. Within hours, the photo was being discussed around the world. Templeton stated that the picture was not fake, and that he was just as confused as everyone else about how the figure appeared behind his daughter. Over the decades, He received thousands of letters from people across the globe offering ideas and explanations, most of which did not make sense to him. He also made it clear that he never received any money for taking the photograph. One suggestion did stand out. About a month after the photo had circulated worldwide, Templeton received a letter from Woomera in Australia. The writers asked to see a clear-color copy of the image. They explained that a countdown for the Blue Streak rocket had been stopped just hours after Templeton took the photo. According to them, two figures wearing outfits similar to spacesuits had been seen near the rocket. Templeton later discovered that part of the Blue Streak rocket had been built and tested in the Burgh Marsh area. James Templeton Carlyle, Cumbria, England. The location where the photo was taken also had a reputation. Many locals believed the surrounding area had a long history of UFO sightings. Some thought this was connected to the nearby nuclear power plant. Templeton told reporters that he had heard stories about sightings in the region, but had never seen anything himself. He also said he had never had a strong interest in UFOs. Eyewitness reports later revealed that on the same day Templeton took the photo, May 23, 1964, a test launch countdown was stopped at a rocket facility in Woomera, Australia. The launch involved the Blue Streak rocket, originally designed as a missile and later adapted for satellite launches. Blue Streak was Britain's contribution to the space race. The program had a solid early track record, but in 1964 it gained worldwide attention because of its strange link to the Solway Firth photograph. The May 23 test launch was halted when automatic survey cameras captured images of two large humanoid figures dressed in what appeared to be white spacesuits walking near the launch pad. At that time, the Templeton photograph had not yet reached Australia, and the launch crew had no knowledge of it. This all happened on the same day Templeton took the 3 photos of his daughter in England. Templeton later described what he had been told about the incident. Staff saw someone inside the restricted firing area on their monitors, so the countdown was stopped immediately. A search was carried out, but no one was found. In the end, the event was blamed on a technical issue. Templeton noted that the figures seen in Australia matched the one in his photograph in build, size, and appearance. Journalists later learned that the rocket scheduled for launch had been manufactured and painted in Addlestone, England, just a short distance from Burgh Marsh. Not long after, an editor from a Cumberland newspaper asked to borrow the original negative so it could be sent to an Australian paper. The image had already appeared in the Australian press, and workers at the Woomera test site believed the Spaceman in the Solway Firth photo looked very similar to the figures captured on their survey cameras. When Australian reporters requested the security footage from Woomera, taken on May 23, 1964, they were told that out of all the film canisters used during the entire Blue Streak project, the only one missing was the canister containing that specific footage. Before an earlier Blue Streak test firing, observers stationed about 100 miles downrange contacted Captain Tom Dalton Morgan. They reported seeing a bright light moving at extreme speed toward restricted airspace. Morgan and several others watched as the light circled the site, then suddenly shot away and vanished. He later said he could not imagine any aircraft or missile capable of performing the movements they witnessed. The Woomera facility had a long record of UFO reports and at least one other cancelled launch due to a white figure spotted on security cameras. The Blue Streak rocket was finally launched successfully on June 5, 1964, but only after a series of strange delays and technical problems. Any link between the Solway Firth Spaceman and the figures seen during Project Blue Streak remains unexplained to this day. The Blue Streak program was ultimately shut down in 1971. Just when it seemed like Templeton's life couldn't get any stranger, Something else happened a few weeks after the photo appeared in the newspapers. What followed depends on which account you read, as the details don't always line up exactly. Around a few weeks after the failed test launch, two men wearing dark suits and bowler hats arrived at the fire station where Templeton worked. They showed up in a dark-colored Jaguar. Some versions of the story say the men actually came to his house instead. At the time, there was no popular idea of men in black like there is today. These men behaved oddly. They referred to each other using numbers rather than names and claimed to be representatives of the British government. They never showed any identification. They asked Templeton to take them to the location where the photograph had been taken. During the 5-mile drive, they questioned him nonstop about the weather that day and about how birds and animals had behaved. The questions felt strange and unrelated. Once they reached the site, the men pressured Templeton to say that the figure in the photo was just a normal man. Templeton refused to say that. After that, the men became angry, got back into their car, and drove off, leaving him to walk the 5 miles back to work. Other versions of the story describe the encounter a bit differently. In one account, the men asked Jim to show them the exact spot where the photo was taken. After arriving, one of them asked, "This is where you saw the man, correct?" Jim replied, "No, I didn't see anyone at all." The men quickly thanked him, returned to their car, and left him standing alone on the marsh. Another detail that appears in some accounts involves a strange question. Where did you see the second spaceman? Templeton had never mentioned a second figure. When he tried to explain this, the men became visibly hostile. Months later, Templeton sent another roll of film to Kodak for development. When it was returned, some of the negatives were missing. He came to believe that the missing images had been taken by government officials, possibly because they showed something sensitive. Not long after the failed Blue Streak test launch, on September 14, 1964, another unusual event was recorded by a U.S. Air Force team filming an Atlas missile test in Big Sur, California. A U.S. Air Force lieutenant later claimed that an unknown object fired 4 beams at a dummy warhead traveling at about 8,000 miles per hour. According to him, the beams disabled the warhead and knocked it off course. The following day, the lieutenant was summoned to meet with his commanding officer, a major, along with 3 men wearing gray suits. After a short discussion and a review of the test footage, he was ordered to never speak about the incident again. Nearly 50 years later, the Solway Firth Spaceman photo still has no clear explanation and remains one of the most puzzling images from the 20th century. In 1996, Templeton and his daughter Elizabeth Dobson spoke with the Scottish newspaper Dumfries Courier. Elizabeth said she had been very young at the time and didn't remember much. She shared her belief that it may have been someone from another world and said it was narrow-minded to assume humans are the only intelligent life in existence. Before his passing, Templeton, then 91 years old, stated that Elizabeth and his grandson Thomas would take responsibility for his historical photo archive, which contained more than 20,000 images. Templeton always stressed that he never made money from the spaceman photograph. He remained unsure of who or what appeared in the image for the rest of his life, right up until his death on November 27, 2011. As the years passed, interest in the photograph did not fade. Instead, it quietly moved from newspaper columns into private discussions, late-night radio shows, and eventually online forums, where new generations stumbled upon the image and asked the same basic question: what exactly was standing behind Elizabeth that day? Every attempt to explain it using shadows, lens flaws, or background figures ran into the same problem. Each explanation seemed to fix one detail while creating another issue somewhere else in the frame. Several Photography experts examined the original negatives and pointed out that the figure appeared solid, properly lit, and consistent with the surrounding environment. This ruled out many common camera errors of the time. Kodak itself stated that the image showed no signs of tampering or double exposure. For Templeton, this confirmation was unsettling rather than comforting. He had never set out to create a mystery, and yet his quiet life had been permanently altered by a single afternoon photograph. Over time, researchers began comparing the Solway Firth image with other unexplained sightings reported during the 1960s. What stood out was not just the look of the figure, but the timing. The photo surfaced during a period filled with rocket tests, satellite launches, and military experiments happening across several countries. To some, this raised the possibility that the figure could have been connected to secret testing or surveillance programs. Others rejected this idea, arguing that no known suit or equipment from that era matched what appeared in the image. Templeton himself remained consistent in his account. He insisted that no one else was present when the photos were taken, and that nothing unusual caught his attention at the time. He also stated that he had no interest in gaining attention or money from the image, something supported by the fact that he refused multiple offers to sell exclusive rights to the photograph. This refusal only added to public curiosity, as it removed a common motive often linked to hoaxes. As decades passed, the image became part of popular culture, appearing in documentaries, books, and television specials focused on unexplained events. Each retelling added new theories, but no final answer. For skeptics, the lack of closure suggested that a simple explanation was still waiting to be discovered. For others, the continued failure to settle the case suggested something beyond current understanding. When we try to think about things we can't explain, questions naturally come up. Could the figure be someone from the future? Could it be a visitor from another world? Maybe it was meant as a warning, or maybe it was something far more ordinary than we think. We may never get a clear answer. But what if, one day sooner than we expect, we finally do? Thanks for watching, Elle. Thanks again, and I'll see you very soon.